Good morning, church. On this fine September morning, we're coming to the end of September, and October is going to be upon us before we know it, and the leaves are going to be changing. And hey, guess what? Before long, it'll be snowing. Isn't that grand? But let's not go there yet. Let's enjoy the fall weather that we are having. We are continuing our study this morning in Corinthians, 2 Corinthians. We're coming to the end of our study in Corinthians, and we have something in store, I think, that we're all going to enjoy here after we're through with Corinthians. But let's plow through the rest of Corinthians here first. This morning we're going to be in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 1 through 4. However, I want to begin this morning in a verse that we studied a while ago in 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 2, where Paul challenges the Corinthian church that as believers, we are to be found faithful. As believers, we are to be found faithful. So let's just take a moment and let's evaluate. Let's say on a scale of 1 to 10, where do you fall in? What number, 1 being the poorest, 10 being the greatest, what number would you give yourself as far as your faithfulness? How are you doing? Where would you be found in that scale of 1 to 10 as far as being faithful is concerned? Well, it's in chapter 11 there in 2 Corinthians that Paul once again talks about faithfulness. And Paul uses a couple of illustrations in these first 4 verses to demonstrate faithfulness. Let's read these verses together. Chapter 11 of 2 Corinthians 1 through 4. Oh, that you would bear with me in a little folly. And indeed, you do bear with me. For I am jealous for you with a godly jealousy. For I have betrothed you as one husband, that I may present you as a chaste virgin to Christ. But I fear lest somehow, as the serpent deceived Eve by his craftiness, so your minds may be corrupted from the simplicity that is Christ. For if he who comes preaches another Jesus, whom we have not preached, or if you receive a different spirit which you have not received, or a different gospel which you have not accepted, you may well put up with it. So what's Paul saying there? He uses 2 illustrations. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry about that. He uses 2 illustrations. One, he uses the illustration of the faithfulness of a husband and wife, a man or a woman, that they are to be faithful to one another. And then he uses the illustration as Eve and the serpent. Eve, which represents that innocence, that purity, but the serpent, the evil one, tempted and deceived Eve and led her and Adam to sin. Paul uses those 2 illustrations to talk about how the false teachers had come into the Corinthian church and was preaching to them a different Jesus than what he had preached when he was there. In Galatians chapter 1, verse 8, he was dealing with a similar issue in the Galatian church, and Paul said, if we or an angel from heaven would preach another gospel other than Jesus Christ died and rose from the dead, then that person be accursed. Paul said, we preach Jesus to you the way Jesus is to be presented. And any other teacher that would teach you something different than that is a false teacher. And Paul is challenging that Corinthian church to be faithful to the Jesus that Paul preached when he was there. These false teachers were trying to draw them away from Christ. And I think that we can apply that to our world today, that there are worldly, even spiritual teachers who would try to draw us away from Christ, that would impress upon us some other doctrine, some other belief, whether it would be worldly or whether it would be spiritual. So it's important that we have a solid foundation, that we know the Word, that we know what the Word of God says, that we know the gospel that we believe. And we get that by reading the Word, by studying the Word, by meditating upon it. Paul challenged Timothy to study to show yourself approved. We can also find people in our lives who love us, who understand who Jesus is, have a faithful walk with the Lord themselves, that they can help us, to equip us, and even to confront us if we're getting off track. They can help us build up our most holy faith. When Satan came knocking at Jesus' door, what did Jesus do? Jesus said, "It is written, it is written, it is written," 3 times. And Jesus answered the enemy's temptation with the word. "Get behind me, Satan," Jesus said, by declaring the written word to the enemy. And the only way that we can declare that written word when we are facing the temptation that the enemy would give us is to know the word, to understand. See, Jesus knew those scriptures that he could quote to the enemy when the enemy came tempting him with the verses that Jesus knew. It is written in the word. It is written in the word. And so when the enemy comes tempting us on whatever level, if we are in the word, we know the word, or if we can call someone up that we love, that we respect, that we know that they're found faithful, and ask them, "Hey, I'm going through this difficult situation, and can you help me? Can you give me some advice? Can you pray with me?" We need to be careful, because the devil is like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. He parades as an angel of light. He will do his best to trick us. He'll do his best to dissuade us, to draw us away from Christ. Paul says, "I'm jealous for you." He says, I don't want you to follow after some other teaching. We have taught you correct. We have given you the Word of God as Jesus has commanded us to. And so therefore, don't stray from that. We can't stray from the teachings of the Word. We need to stay focused upon Jesus, and he will get us through. So again, ask yourself, are you found faithful? I think if you're honest, as I'm honest with myself, there are times that I am very, very faithful. But then there's other time my faithfulness kind of lags a little bit. And it's that time I need to pull myself up and say, wait a minute, the Word of God is written. I need to get into it. I need to understand what it says to me so that I can be found faithful. So let's be found faithful this week, church. God bless you, and we'll see you on Sunday. Have a great rest of the week.